The power of the grass-fed garden applied to strawberries here. I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. Like I promised you in the previous video, I would show you this strawberry patch when it is complete. And yes, it does look completely different. Now, I came across a bale of straw. And you can use straw, you can use the grass that's grown on the side, but remember what I've talked about in previous videos, that for every square foot of garden that you have, you need to have a square foot of cover crop growing somewhere. And the reason why is I'm demonstrating it right now. The cover crops on the side of the hill here, and by the way, I'm standing on this bund. We have terraces to level and move water safely across the soil, but I'm standing on the bund that was previously grass, hip tall. In fact, I had given a light dusting of the straw over the strawberries, and then I started working down the sides, and I came up with such an abundance of cover crop, including hairy vetch, which is a nitrogen fixing plant, and the different grains, that I even had to start throwing the abundance in the paths and trails. But as you can see, there's a light dusting over top of the strawberries, and man, it's like a little blanket in here. I'm walking around in this thing. It's beautiful, but look at these strawberries. So we got the little strawberries down here. Now, strawberries, you're not going to cover them up completely. You're just going to simply have a light dusting of a material over them, and then the strawberries will push their way out. Because if you have too much grass, remember what the grass does in the grass-fed systems is the grass actually mounds down and then mulches the soil and kills off the plants underneath. So we want the mulch around the strawberries, but lightly over top of them. Now, I know a lot of you folks are going to be asking about this. Am I introducing seed to the garden bed itself? And in some cases, yes, I am. But again, this is cover crop seed. This is a type of cereal grain, and it's going to, again, create more biomass and more abundance for this particular bed. Now, what we've got here, and I'm walking through the bed now, so you can walk on the top of the bunds, or you can walk in the paths around the beds. But you do not walk on the beds, and you do not walk on any slopes. You want to make sure you've got firm footing on level ground. But what you're going to see here is you have pea grass. This is going to break down and feed the soil. So yes, I disturbed the soil, making these mounds, making these trenches and paths so that water slowed and spread down the hill. But I'm replenishing the soil with biomass and organic material so that the biology of that soil can continue. Now again, if I had a nice thick 6 inches of topsoil, I wouldn't need to actually dig. I can simply just mound that soil and make the paths around it. But in this case, I have clay, so I do need to dig because it's not porous. The water isn't going to run right through it. And then I also dig in this area because these are new, fresh beds, and I'm building structure for these strawberries to live for 2 to 3 years in these particular areas. Now, the grass and materials will break down, feed the soil, but meanwhile, it's going to protect the soil. It's going to provide a blanket over the soil. And what you can see here is eventually what that grass is going to look like. Look at that. It's just kind of rotten mesh. See that? That is the microbes to start to break down that soil. It's starting to build a humus. Not a humus like the chickpea food, but humus as in high carbon in the soil. And that is going to start. Look at that. Look at that. That's starting to build up underneath the grass here. And as we cut this grass down and we throw it on the beds and we throw it around the beds and we throw it everywhere, we're building up our nutrient base. Now, the straw is about $7 a bale right now, maybe more or less where you're at. And if you come across a good deal and you're able to get straw, then get straw. That works as well. But again, you can grow the cover crops, you can leave vegetative strips, and you can keep layering in that material. Now, it is best that you're cutting these areas between the beds before they go to seed. So you can see out there, there's some of that stuff's been cut recently, some of it's been cut in the last week. It will grow back very quickly, but you can see how the beds, even these large beds, were cut, and it just comes again. So I cut this down today. I shave it as low as I can get it. I use it on my beds, and I can see a little bit of shaping that I'm going to have to do on this because the channel isn't as deep as I'd like it to be. But again, I cut and it comes again. So I'm continually having my mulch and my biomass to feed that soil and build up the nutrients in the soil. I've built permanent raised beds here, at least permanent for 2 or 3 years, so that we can cultivate these strawberries and really get the abundance out of the strawberries. I will go through and peek on these strawberries and kind of open them up a little bit so that they get sunlight. But right now, we're expecting some rain, so I'm just trying to clean up and get out of here before it gets too wet. But again, the strawberries will peek their way up out of there, and they will start growing like crazy. And we can come back later and put in more straw around the strawberries. They're called strawberries for a reason, by the way, because they'll grow in a straw bale. But most likely, in a couple weeks, there'll be enough grass that I can cut the grass with a scythe, and I'll show you the scythe that I'm using. I can cut the grass with a scythe and start the cycle all over again. And I'm using a long Japanese style scythe here. Highly recommend it. Keep it sharp. And this allows me to cut this grass consistently, quickly. It took very little time. And then ultimately I'm mounding those materials in. Now, could I have doubled up on the amount of mulch I have here and maybe filled these walking paths full of mulch? Yes. But too much mulch on top of the strawberries is going to kill the strawberries, just as it would kill any other types of weeds that are on those beds. Now, do I need to water this? Well, I could water it, but it's going to rain here shortly, so I'd rather just let the rain take care of it. But ultimately, what do you think? Do you think you can implement this kind of growing system on your small farm, homestead, or estate? Can you see how the soil is feeding itself? We're growing biomass very close to where we're working. We didn't have to haul straw bales around, but we ended up with a straw bale anyway, you know. But ultimately, we didn't have to haul the straw bales around. I have more than enough material here to feed the soil. I am simply chopping and dropping the material and laying it about the beds. So these strawberries are going to grow really well where we're at. I don't have to fertilize them, because ultimately they're being fertilized by the decomposition of the chopped material that we put down there. And because we got the material before it went too much to seed, or at least before things that we don't like go to seed, if we do get volunteers, we simply just cut it off at the ground, layer it on the bed, and we'll ultimately have more and more abundance. If you have questions about what I've covered here, you can ask them in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe. Write us. You can visit at www.prosperityhomestead.org. Go to the contact page, ask your questions, and I will see you in the next video. This has been about perennial strawberry beds and how easy it is no matter what space you have or environment.